You are not one of the visible stones. You are the piece the whole arch has been waiting for. The cool wedge of stone at the top that a mason lifts with dusty hands, while the morning air still smells like lime and cut rock. Chosen one, hear me clearly. That is why your life has never moved like everybody else's. The keystone is not scattered with the others on the ground to impress the eye. It is shaped for a moment, a place, and a pressure that comes later. And whether people know the language for it or not, they feel that same pattern in you. Look at an arch for what it really is. You've got curved stones leaning toward one another, friction holding for a breath, weight searching for somewhere to go. It can look almost finished, almost stable, almost ready. But almost does not hold anything for long. Because at the very top sits the space reserved for the final piece, the central wedge-shaped stone that does not just complete the form, it decides whether the form can live. That is the first hidden truth about you. You were never designed to be first noticed. You were designed to be finally understood. And that has confused people around you for years. They saw your quietness and mistook it for absence. They saw your patience and thought you had no fire. They saw you standing back, learning, watching, and they assumed you were ordinary. But spiritually, psychologically, structurally, some lives are built like that arch. They do not reveal their meaning at the beginning. They reveal it at the point of alignment. The last stone set is often the one that locks the whole arch, and that is why your timing has looked strange to people who only respect what arrives early and loudly. Your power is not theatrical. It is positional. It is fitted. It is exact. That is also why certain rooms feel different when you enter them, not because you make noise, but because something in people senses order before it sees it. They may not praise you. They may not even like what your presence stirs up. But deep down, they can feel that some structures do not fully stand without what you carry. If this is already speaking to your spirit, subscribe and leave a like so we can keep walking this path together. Because the real mystery is not that you were overlooked. It is why everything starts shifting the moment you are finally set in place. And that is where the second revelation begins. Not with size, not with ornament, but with timing. The stone at the crown is never dropped in at the start. No builder begins there. The air can be full of scraping tools, chalk dust, and the dry tap of rock against rock, and still that top space remains open on purpose. This piece is the last stone set. Only then does the curve stop straining and start holding. Only then do all the others settle into their true position. Chosen one, do you hear the mercy in that? What people called delay in your life may have been placement. What they called lateness may have been order. So your path has felt so different from people who were praised early. Some stones get noticed while the structure is still lying flat on the ground. They get handled, measured, admired, moved around. But the one above them enters at the moment of consequence. It arrives when everything else has already learned where to lean. Spiritually, that means your life was never meant to be understood in fragments. Psychologically, it means your impact shows up at the point of completion, not at the point of noise. You were not forgotten. You were being reserved. And let me say this gently. That kind of timing unsettles people. Because when someone is the last stone set, their arrival changes the meaning of everything that came before. Suddenly, the pieces that looked separate become one form. Suddenly, the pressure has somewhere to go. Suddenly, what seemed unfinished reveals its intention. Some people go quiet when you finally step into your place. They are not always resisting you. Sometimes they are realizing that your presence exposes what was incomplete without you. Sometimes they understand, all at once, that you were quietly indispensable long before anybody had words for it. This is also why you must stop measuring yourself by early applause. The crown of the arch is not where attention begins. It is where alignment is proven. And once that piece is seated, nobody can pretend the shape means nothing. But there is a harder truth hiding inside that top opening, because until it is there, the whole thing is still one breath away from collapse. And that is the third revelation. Before that top piece is seated, the arch is not strong, no matter how convincing it looks from a distance. You can picture it, can't you? The curve is there. The stones are cut, dust sits in the grooves, hands may even step back for a second and admire the shape. But if that center opening is still empty, the whole thing is living on borrowed balance. One shift, one uneven strain, one little tremor through the frame, and what seems secure proves it was never truly standing. So your role has been so misunderstood. People often assume the most visible parts are the most important. They are not. The part that looks plain can be the one keeping collapse from telling the truth. This is where your life begins to make more sense. There have been places where you entered quietly, and within days, sometimes within minutes, the atmosphere changed. Not because you performed, not because you demanded attention, but because something in the structure recognized what had been missing. Conversations got clearer. Mixed signals started drying up. People chose their words with more care. Plans that felt loose suddenly had to become real. In psychology, they would call that a regulating presence, someone whose internal order affects the group. Spiritually, I would say it even simpler. Some souls carry a steadiness that makes pretending harder. And that is exactly why your presence is admired by some and resisted by others. Because when the stabilizing piece arrives, weakness can no longer hide behind appearance. A shaky bond feels shaky. A false promise feels hollow. A system held together by image starts groaning under its own weight. You are revealing the instability. The part that bears the hidden weight does not create pressure. It shows where pressure was already going. And that can be uncomfortable for people who built their peace on denial. So, if you have ever wondered why certain spaces seem fine until you arrive, then suddenly everything gets honest, this is your answer. It is not your imagination. You are not too much. Your placement changes what the structure can get away with. And the deeper mystery is this. How can one plain wedge do what bigger, louder stones never could? And the answer to that is the fourth revelation. Its strength is not in spectacle, but in shape. Run your hand across cut stone in your mind for a moment. The grit on the fingertips, the chalky dust in the lines, the cool firmness of edges that were not left random. That top piece matters because it is wedge-shaped. It is formed to enter a narrowing space and meet pressure from both sides at once. That is what makes it powerful. Fit, precision, the kind of design most people never notice until weight comes down. And that, chosen one, is why your life has never worked when you tried to be a copy of what already existed around you. You were not shaped to lie flat in places that reward imitation. You were cut for tension, for a narrow space, for moments where other people lose their center. That is why certain seasons felt so uncomfortable. They were painful. They were forming your edges. The friction, the delay, the strange pressure of becoming someone others did not fully understand. All of it was carving something exact into you. Psychology would call that adaptive resilience. the way pressure can refine a person instead of hollowing them out. Spiritually, I would tell you something even plainer. Heaven does not chisel with cruelty, but it does chisel with purpose. And because of that shape, you do something many people cannot. When force comes down, you do not only endure it, you meet it correctly. You instinctively look for alignment. You can feel when something is off center, when words do not match intent, when a situation is forcing a fit that was never true. You may have thought that made you difficult, intense, too discerning. It makes you useful in a way performance never can be. Some people know how to attract eyes. You know how to hold form. Some people know how to sound important. You know how to become quietly indispensable when the structure begins to strain. That is also why your hardest years left you with something others still do not understand. Not just endurance, but a strange ability to redirect pressure instead of being crushed by it. And once you see what that really means, you will understand why people feel lighter near you, even when you are carrying more than they know. And that is the fifth revelation. Your strength was never meant to look like carrying everything alone. When weight presses down on the crown of an arch, that top stone does something almost holy in its simplicity. It does not hoard the force. It does not trap it in itself like a clenched jaw holding too much strain. It channels the compressive load outward, sending the pressure through the curve so the whole form can bear more than any single piece could survive by itself. That is how the structure holds. That is how it endures rain, time, footsteps, silence. And that, chosen one, is one of the deepest reasons people feel steadier around you without always understanding why. You have a way of taking pressure and turning it into order. By receiving tension, sorting it, and sending it where it belongs. In practical terms, that can look like this. When other people are spinning, you name the real issue. When emotions flood a room, you separate what is yours from what is not. When responsibilities pile up, you instinctively look for the right distribution instead of collapsing into noise. Psychology would call that emotional regulation, boundary awareness, cognitive organization under stress. Spiritually, I would call it grace under compression. The point is the same. You do not just survive weight. You help weight move correctly. That is why your presence can feel like relief. People who have been carrying feelings they never processed, expectations they never questioned, fears they never named, they come near you and something begins to sort itself out. Not always comfortably, but truthfully. The same stone that bears the hidden weight also teaches the rest of the arch where to send theirs. This is why loud personalities often confuse attention with strength. Attention gathers eyes. Structure carries load. And those are not the same gift. Still, there is something tender here that you need to hear. A piece like that can be used without being appreciated. It can become so reliable, so steady, so quietly indispensable that people start treating its strength as if it costs nothing. They admire the arch, pass beneath it, praise the beauty of the curve, and never once think about the plain stone at the top that made the whole thing hold. And if that part of this story touches a bruise in you, there is a reason. And that bruise leads us into the sixth revelation. The plainest part of the arch is often the one everybody depends on the most. Look at the crown of an old stone span after years of weather. The edges may be softened, dust settles in the seam. Rain darkens the surface for a while, then the sun bleaches it back again. Nothing about that top piece begs for applause. It does not glitter. It does not stretch wider than the others. To an untrained eye, it can seem almost forgettable. And yet, remove that one, and all the elegance below it becomes a memory. That is the sorrow many of you have carried without naming it. You have been valued for what held through you, while being overlooked in your own right. That pattern leaves marks on the soul. When a person becomes known as the steady one, the one who can take strain and still remain composed, people can begin to treat that gift like free air. They breathe it, benefit from it, lean into it, and rarely stop to ask what it costs. In self-help language, this is what happens to quietly competent people in families, friendships, and working circles. Their consistency becomes invisible through repetition. Spiritually, it is even deeper than that. Some callings are wrapped in ordinary appearance, so that truth has time to separate sincere eyes from shallow ones. Not everyone can recognize what is quietly indispensable while it is still standing over them. And I want you to hear this without bitterness. Being overlooked does not make you less central. Being plain to the crowd does not make you plain in design. The top stone was never weak because passers-by failed to admire it. Its function remained holy, whether anyone praised it or not. Still, there is a reason certain seasons made you ache. You could feel people enjoying the shelter of the arch while ignoring the part that held it together. You could feel the difference between being appreciated as a soul and being used as support. So some of your silence has not been pride at all. It has been discernment. It has been the slow realization that not everyone who benefits from your strength is meant to have full access to it. And once that realization begins, something shifts. Because the next truth is not about being unseen, but about why your presence makes pretenders uneasy the moment you stop offering yourself so freely. And that is the seventh revelation. The stone at the top does not threaten the arch by force. It unsettles it by truth. Once that piece is in place, every block beneath it has to meet reality. There is no room left for a bad angle pretending to fit. No loose seam can hide forever. No stone gets to lean in a lazy way and still expect the curve to hold. The pressure tells the truth on everything. So your presence can make certain people restless without you saying very much at all. You do not have to accuse what is false. Order does that work for you. This is one of the strangest things about a life like yours. You may walk into a space with calm in your voice, with no plan to confront anyone, and still feel the temperature shift. Eyes sharpen. Jokes get thinner. People who were relaxed a moment ago start explaining themselves too much. That is not always because you are being judged. Sometimes it is because the structure around you senses that pretense will not sit as comfortably anymore. In psychology, there is a simple truth here. Regulated people disturb unregulated patterns, not by aggression, but by contrast. A steady center makes wobbling more obvious. And this is where many chosen ones get confused. You assume the discomfort around you means you did something wrong. You start shrinking, softening your words, dulling your discernment, handing out access so no one feels exposed. But the crown stone was never called to make instability comfortable. It was called to help the whole form become honest. There is a difference. A piece that locks the whole arch cannot also help everyone keep their disguises. The more truly it fits, the more clearly strain gets revealed for what it is. So some people admire you from a distance and resist you up close. From far away, your steadiness looks beautiful. Nearby, it asks something of them. It asks them to carry their real share. It asks their words to match their weight. It asks their image to submit to structure. And not everybody wants that. Some only like strength when it entertains them. They do not like it when it rearranges the room. But here is the deeper turn. The greatest resistance did not begin when others misunderstood your role. It began when you started sensing it for yourself. And that is the eighth revelation. A stone shaped for the crown suffers when it keeps pretending it belongs lower down. Think about the fit again. The top opening is narrow, exact, demanding. The piece cut for that space cannot spend its life trying to flatten itself into the side of the arch without feeling strain in every edge. It may stay in the structure for a while. It may even look useful. But there will be friction where there should have been rest, pressure where there should have been alignment. Chosen one, this is what has been happening in your life whenever you tried to live as less than what you knew. Deep down, you are made to hold. This is not arrogance. It is design. The stone at the top does not become important by bragging. It becomes important by fitting. In the same way, your calling is not fulfilled by convincing people you matter. It is fulfilled when you stop offering yourself for roles that keep you misaligned. Psychology has a clean phrase for this. Self-betrayal creates internal friction. You feel it in the body, in the breath, in the tiredness that sleep does not solve. Spiritually, it feels like grieving a life you are still physically standing inside. And many of you have mistaken that grief for weakness, when in truth it was the ache of wrong placement. That is why you have felt exhausted in spaces where others seemed comfortable. They were side stones in a side stone role. You were trying to act small in a shape that was never meant to stay small. You kept volunteering to be filler, to be background, to be endlessly available, to be digestible for people who only know how to celebrate what asks nothing of them. Meanwhile, the part of you that was made to lock the whole arch kept tightening inside from misfit. Quiet souls often do this to themselves. They would rather shrink than disrupt the structure by standing where they belong. But there is a cost. When the wrong piece takes the wrong place for too long, the whole span feels it. And when the one designed for the crown keeps calling itself ordinary, it does not become humble. It becomes tired, overused, and strangely ashamed of its own weight. That shame has whispered to many of you for years, and once you understand that your exhaustion may be the sound of misplacement, you can no longer ignore the question of what it has already cost you. And that question brings us to the ninth revelation. Fatigue is not always a sign that you are weak. Sometimes it is the sound a structure makes when the wrong weight is resting in the wrong place. Picture a crown stone forced down into the side of a curve, pressed where its angle does not belong. The edges grind. Dust gathers faster in the seam. The fit is never peaceful. It may stay there for a time, yes, but everything about it feels like strain pretending to be service. That is the wear many of you have called just life. Some of what you have been carrying is not ordinary tiredness. It is the ache of being misused by roles that do not match your design. This kind of exhaustion hides in plain sight. It shows up when you over-explain yourself so smaller expectations will feel safer around you. It shows up when you keep saying yes because you do not want the arch to wobble, even though the weight was never yours to hold that way. It shows up when you become the emotional brace, the interpreter, the fixer, the soft place for everyone else's confusion, while your own inner seams are drying out from neglect. Psychology has words for pieces of this: chronic overfunctioning, people-pleasing, identity strain. But the stone language says it cleaner. The wrong placement rubs the soul raw. And because you are strong, you have survived it longer than many could. That is why this has been so hard to recognize. Your endurance has disguised your misalignment. You kept standing, so everyone assumed the fit must be fine. You kept giving, so others mistook your sacrifice for endless capacity. Meanwhile, the part of you that was made to hold something exact kept sending signals: weariness after certain rooms, relief after certain absences, tension whenever you shrank to remain acceptable. None of that was random. The structure was speaking through pressure. So hear me with tenderness here. Your tiredness may not be asking for more discipline. It may be asking for truth. Not every arch deserves your center. Not every opening was cut for your shape. Not every space that can use your strength has been assigned your strength. Once you begin to see that, compassion for yourself starts replacing shame. And the moment shame loosens its grip, another gift begins to rise: the sharp, holy discernment that pressure has been training in you all along. And that rising discernment is the 10th revelation. Pressure did not just test your shape, it taught you how to read structure. A stone cut for the crown has to understand angles. It has to know where the curve is true and where it is forcing itself. It has to meet both sides without splitting the span. So the strain you endured sharpened something in you. You began to notice what others walked past. A seam that looked small to everyone else felt important to you. A slight shift in balance caught your attention. A line that seemed smooth from below told a different story when you looked closer. That was not you being difficult. That was your design learning to read weight. This is why you often sense trouble before anybody names it. You feel when a connection is leaning too hard on one side. You hear it in the tone before you hear it in the words. You notice when a promise has no support beneath it, when a plan is stacked on image instead of truth, when a room feels polished but not stable. Psychology says you developed pattern recognition under stress. Your mind learned to scan for what does not fit because your own survival depended on it. Spiritually, I believe some souls are trained in hidden places until they can detect a crack through sound alone. And because of that, you have probably been misunderstood more than once. People called you too serious, too sensitive, too intense, too alert. But what they were really reacting to was your accuracy. Loud people often get praised for confidence, even when they see very little. Quiet souls like you may hesitate and still see the whole curve. You were not made to admire surfaces. You were shaped to notice where pressure will go when the weather changes, when the crowd leaves, when the applause dies down and only structure remains. That kind of sight is rare. It is also the reason some people come to you for clarity and others avoid you when they want permission to keep pretending. But discernment alone is not what makes them watch you so closely. Many can sense what is wrong and still do nothing with it. Many can identify the weak seam and then spend years decorating it. What sets your path apart is not only that you see the strain, it is that sooner or later you move according to what you saw. And that movement is the 11th revelation. The crown stone does not merely understand the arch. Once it is placed, it commits to the load. That is the difference people feel in you. Many can speak wisely about structure while standing nowhere that costs them anything. Many can point at weak seams, name imbalance, even describe exactly why a curve will not hold, and then go right back to living under the same crooked pressure. But the piece shaped for the top cannot stay theoretical forever. Its whole purpose is fulfilled in placement. It has to meet the weight for real. That is why your life has carried a different kind of authority. Not because you always had perfect words, but because sooner or later you acted on what you knew. You have done this more times than people realize. You stepped back from openings that looked inviting but felt wrong in the fit. You stopped holding conversations together when the truth inside them had already gone hollow. You let certain expectations fall away instead of sacrificing your inner alignment to keep everyone comfortable. Sometimes that looked quiet from the outside: a shorter answer, a delayed return, a door gently left closed, a room you no longer reached for. But spiritually, those were not small moments. Those were acts of agreement with design. Psychology would call it behavioral congruence, when your choices begin matching what your nervous system and your discernment have already been telling you. I would call it courage with clean hands. And that is why people study you even when they do not say so. Because action unsettles fantasy. Insight can be admired from a distance. Embodied truth cannot be ignored. The stone that locks the whole arch does not ask every other piece for permission before taking its place. It settles, and the entire curve has to respond. In the same way, when you finally move according to what you have seen, other people lose the luxury of pretending your clarity was only a mood, a phase, or a passing sensitivity. Your choices make the invisible visible. Still, let me say something tender here. That kind of courage is rarely born in comfort. It is not something people develop from easy days and soft opinions. The reason your decisions carry weight is because something in your life trained you to stop bargaining with truth once you recognized it. And when we touch that place, we reach the furnace where this strength was really formed. And that furnace is the 12th revelation. A stone does not learn to hold a crown by living under no pressure at all. Think of the arch again in bad weather. Damp air settling into the joints. Cold seeping into the rock before dawn. The weight above never asking whether the stone feels ready today. That top piece becomes trustworthy because it has met compression and did not give way. In the same way, your steadiness was formed in seasons that pressed on you from both sides. Seasons when you had to find your center without applause, without clear instructions, sometimes without the comfort of being fully understood. That is why your strength feels different from performance. Some people sound strong because they have practiced the language of strength. You carry it differently. Yours has texture. It has the quiet of someone who has sat with uncertainty long enough to stop panicking at every tremor. Psychology would say repeated hardship can build real adaptive capacity when a person keeps integrating what they lived through instead of fragmenting under it. Spiritually, I would say the pressure did not come to ruin your design. It came to prove what your design could bear. That does not make the hard seasons pleasant. It makes them meaningful. And I know some of you need to hear that with tears in your chest. Because you have been tempted to read your heavier chapters as evidence that something was wrong with you. But the crown stone receives weight precisely because of where it belongs. Greater pressure is not always punishment. Sometimes it is assignment. Sometimes the reason you were pressed harder than those around you is that your shape was being trusted with something central. You were learning how not to split when the force came down. You were learning how to stay true when support felt thin. You were learning how to bear the hidden weight without turning bitter. That history is why people feel something real in you now, even when you are silent. They may not know your story. They may not know how many inner storms taught you that calm. But they can sense that your steadiness is not borrowed. It was tested. And once a soul has been tested that way, something else begins to change too. Not just how much attention it wants, but how little it needs. And that changed relationship with attention is the 13th revelation. The strongest stone in the arch does not need to announce itself to prove it belongs there. Think about how quiet the crown really is. No trumpet, no flare of color, just cool rock meeting cool rock. A firm fit at the top, and then the whole span begins doing what it was made to do. That is why your power has started sounding different over time. Earlier in life, you may have still felt the urge to explain yourself, defend your motives, or make your value understandable to people who only trust what is flashy. But pressure has a way of curing that. Once a stone has truly held, it no longer needs applause to believe in its own function. That is the freedom people feel around you now. You are not begging to be seen the way you once did. You are not swelling yourself to look important either. You have become steadier than that. Psychology would say your center is becoming self-sourced rather than crowd-sourced. Your nervous system is learning not to borrow identity from reaction. Spiritually, it is even simpler. When a soul finally accepts where it was placed, it stops wasting holy energy trying to convince every passerby. This is why your presence carries such an unusual calm. It is settledness, and settledness has a sound people cannot ignore. It is in the pause before you answer. It is in the way you do not chase every invitation. It is in the way you can stay plain and still remain quietly indispensable. Loud people often create motion. Grounded people create gravity. One scatters attention. The other gathers respect without reaching for it. That difference is becoming sharper in your life now, and not everyone knows what to do with it. Some expected you to keep performing your accessibility. Some expected you to remain endlessly available, endlessly explainable, endlessly easy to move. But a stone that has learned its place does not keep rolling around to make others comfortable. It becomes still. It becomes exact. And that very stillness starts changing the entire atmosphere around it. People lean in differently. They second-guess themselves more. They feel both drawn and exposed, comforted and challenged. Because when a person no longer needs outside permission to stand where they belong, others are forced to notice how much of their own life still depends on permission. And that is where the magnetism begins, not in charm, but in stability people did not realize they were starving for. And that hunger for stability is the 14th revelation. People are drawn to the stone that holds because most of them are tired of leaning on things that only look strong. An arch does not attract trust through noise. It attracts trust through what it survives. You can hear that in old stone, in the hush beneath it, in the way footsteps pass under a span without fear, because the curve above has proven itself over time. That is the kind of response your presence stirs. Some people come close to you and feel their breathing slow down a little. Their thoughts stop racing quite so hard. Their words get more honest or more careful because something in them senses they are near a structure, not a performance. That is magnetism in its truest form. It is the pull of coherence, not the glitter of personality trying to win the room. Psychology would say people are often regulated by those who are internally organized. A nervous system that has found its center can calm one that is scattered. Spiritually, it goes even deeper than that. Souls that have stopped bargaining with truth carry a kind of shelter. Not everyone can explain it, but many can feel it. That is why some people linger near you, ask for your view, watch your choices, or seem strangely affected by your silence. But not every reaction to that pull is pure. Some people are comforted by your steadiness. Some are awakened by it. Some envy it because your settled nature exposes how fractured their own inner structure feels. They may call you distant when you are simply grounded. They may call you intimidating when what they really feel is contrast. A crown stone does not chase admiration, yet it gathers attention because everything around it knows the curve would not hold the same without it. That is what makes you quietly indispensable in more places than you realize. Still, hear this carefully. Being magnetic does not mean you are meant to carry every person who reaches for your strength. Not every hand that touches the arch is part of the design. Not every need belongs in your keeping. Some only want relief, not truth. Some want access, not alignment. And if you do not learn that difference, your gift for holding can be mistaken for a duty to be endlessly available. That is where the next lesson becomes necessary. Because the stone that supports everything still has to know which weight was never meant to rest on it. And that difference is the 15th revelation. Not every weight that leans on you has been ordained to stay there. An arch is not a dumping place. It is a design. The stone at the crown is central, yes, but it is not responsible for holding random burdens that were never part of the span. If rubble is piled on top of it, if stray force is added from the wrong angle, even something beautifully fitted can be strained beyond its purpose. That matters for you more than you may realize. Because when a soul has learned to steady others, it can start confusing usefulness with assignment. And that confusion is expensive. You have felt that cost. It is there in the heaviness that comes after certain conversations. It is there in the dull ache of being the one everyone reaches for, while almost nobody asks what supporting all of that is doing to your own inner frame. It is there when your gift for holding becomes a silent contract you never agreed to, a role people place on you because you once made difficult things look manageable. Psychology would call this poor boundary distinction, the blurring between empathy and over-responsibility. Spiritually, I would say it this way. Mercy without discernment can become self-abandonment dressed in virtue. That is why maturity changes the way a strong person serves. At first, you may think love means saying yes to every burden. Later, you learn that real alignment is more precise than that. The stone that truly supports the arch does not slide out of place to rescue every loose piece on the ground. It remains true to its own fit. It becomes accurate. This is where some of you are being called now, not to harden, but to refine, not to stop caring, but to stop carrying what was never yours. There is holiness in that restraint. There is wisdom in letting certain weight reveal its rightful owner. And yes, people will feel the change. Some will call it distance because they benefited from your overextension. Some will call it pride because they preferred the version of you that kept breaking your own edges to cushion their lack of structure. Let them misunderstand for a while. A crown stone does not apologize for staying where the design requires it. Once it stops taking on stray pressure, the true shape of the whole span becomes easier to see. And when that extra weight falls away, something long hidden in your life finally comes into view. And what comes into view is the 16th revelation. Your life only looked random when you were staring at single stones instead of the whole arch. When rubble is cleared and extra weight is taken off, the curve reads differently. You can finally see the line running from one side to the other. You notice how each cut, each angle, each empty space was preparing for one exact point at the top. The same is true of your journey. Seasons that once felt disconnected, the delay, the shaping, the pressure, the strange pull away from what was popular but unstable, begin to read as one design instead of a pile of unrelated struggles. This is what happens when divine architecture starts becoming visible. And yes, I mean architecture. The possibility that your life has been arranged with more intention than you could see while standing inside it. The central stone at the crown is wedge-shaped for a reason. It comes last for a reason. Without it, the arch cannot stand. Once it is there, the whole form can bear immense weight. And still, from below, it can seem plain. Do you hear how perfectly that has echoed through your story? What looked delayed was placement. What looked ordinary was consecrated. What looked like pressure was training. That is why some of your unanswered questions have started going quiet. Not because you have every detail solved, but because your spirit is beginning to recognize pattern where your fear once saw only interruption. Psychology would say the mind heals when it can organize experience into meaning instead of fragmentation. Spiritually, I would say grace is letting you step back far enough to see the span. You were never meant to understand your calling stone by stone, day by day, reaction by reaction. You were meant to see, eventually, that the whole shape was moving toward a crown. And once a person sees that, humility changes. You stop calling yourself accidental. You stop treating your discernment like a flaw, your steadiness like an inconvenience, your boundaries like a betrayal of love. You begin to understand that what has been forming in you is not merely survival. It is placement. Sacred, specific, load-bearing placement. But here is the thing. Seeing the design is not the same as agreeing with it. And the final resistance in many chosen ones is not ignorance anymore. It is the trembling moment right before they stop apologizing for where they truly belong. And that trembling moment is the 17th revelation. The hardest step for a chosen soul is often not being shaped for the crown, but consenting to stand there without apology. By this point, the pattern is no longer hidden from you. You have seen what delay was doing. You have felt what misplacement cost. You have learned the difference between real weight and stray burden. The curve has started making sense. And still, there can be one last hesitation. Not because the design is unclear, but because accepting it changes how you must carry yourself from this day forward. A stone at the top cannot keep pretending it is just another loose piece on the ground. That is where many of you are standing right now. Indecision, not asking, do I have value, but asking, will I stop shrinking from the value I already know is there? That question is holy. It is also unsettling. Because the moment you agree with your placement, certain habits cannot come with you. You cannot keep offering your center to every unstable structure. You cannot keep calling discernment negativity, strength coldness, or boundaries selfishness. Once the crown stone knows where it belongs, modesty stops meaning self-erasure. It starts meaning faithful alignment. And when that alignment begins, reactions around you become even clearer. Some people will finally relax because they have been waiting for you to stop doubting what they could already feel in your presence. Others will resist more strongly than before because your agreement with truth removes their ability to define you from the outside. This is why your life may feel as if it is narrowing and opening at the same time. Narrowing because fewer spaces can hold the real you. Opening because the right structure can finally form around who you actually are. Psychology would call this identity consolidation. Spiritually, it feels like a gate closing behind you and a horizon opening ahead. Do not fear that moment. The stone at the top does not become arrogant by taking its rightful place. It becomes useful in the way it was always meant to be. It locks the whole arch by agreeing with its own fit. And once that agreement happens, everything below has to settle honestly. Which is why the final truth is not about their reaction anymore. It is about what happens when you stop asking the world who you are and start standing like the answer has already been given. And this is the final revelation. The moment you stop arguing with your placement, your whole life stops sounding like loose stone and starts sounding like a finished span. Every question doesn't disappear overnight. Every person doesn't suddenly understand you. But because once the crown accepts the crown, the struggle changes. The energy that used to leak into proving, shrinking, rescuing, and explaining comes home. It settles into fit. It settles into truth. And the structure around you begins to answer that decision. What belongs stays. What was only leaning slides away. What was built on noise cannot keep pretending to be solid under the quiet authority of a life that has finally taken its place. So people react to you the way they do. You were never here to decorate the arch. You were here to complete it. You were never meant to compete with louder stones or roll yourself smaller so unstable hands could feel comfortable holding you. You were shaped for the high point, for the joining point, for the pressure point where everything beneath has to become honest. Some will call that intensity. Some will call it distance. Some will simply stand under what your life became and feel safe without knowing why. Let them call it what they need to call it. The stone does not answer every voice passing below. It just holds. And maybe that is the wisdom hidden in the dust at the top. When the right piece finally settles into its narrow place, there is no applause from the rock itself, no speech, no performance, only the sudden stillness of weight finding where it was meant to go. Then evening comes. The air cools against the surface. A small line of shadow gathers beneath the curve, and the opening below remains clear. If this message met you at the right hour, stay close. Subscribe, leave a like, and let your voice rest in the comments if this spoke to something real in you. May your edges stay true, may your place hold firm, and may the peace that comes after right placement find you gently. God bless you.